The bus hissed to a stop at the edge of the city, its brakes squealing like a wounded animal. Emily stepped down onto cracked pavement, clutching a small cloth bag that held everything she owned. 2 dresses, a photograph of her father smiling beside a fishing rod, and a single coin her mother had pressed into her palm the night before. For luck, her mother had said, "Eyes already on the television." Emily was 13, small for her age, with dark hair that fell straight to her shoulders and eyes that had learned to look down. Mrs. Green waited beneath a flickering street lamp, her coat too heavy for the mild evening. She smelled of lilacs and cigarette smoke. "You're late," she said, though the bus had arrived on time. Emily followed her to a black car that smelled of leather and something metallic. They drove in silence through streets that grew narrower and darker, past shops with iron gates and windows painted black. Emily pressed her face to the glass, watching the city swallow the last of the daylight. The building had no sign. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and the low murmur of men's voices. Velvet curtains hung like wounds. Mrs. Green led her past a bar where women in silk dresses leaned against polished wood, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Emily's stomach twisted. This was not a hotel. This was not a restaurant. "You'll start tonight," Mrs. Green said, pushing open a door to a room with a single bed and a mirror that reflected too much. "Change into this." She tossed a dress the color of dried blood onto the mattress. Emily's fingers shook as she unbuttoned her own clothes. The fabric of the new dress clung to her skin like a second, unwanted body. The first man was older, with a gold watch that caught the light when he moved. He didn't speak. He simply looked at her the way a butcher looks at meat. When it was over, Emily lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling until the cracks in the plaster became rivers, became roads, became escape. The shelter smelled of bleach and cinnamon rolls on Saturday mornings. Emily had been there 3 years now. Long enough for the girls to call her Miss E without flinching. Long enough for the walls to hold their stories instead of echoing them. She kept a tin of Maria's old biscuits on her desk, empty but polished bright. A reminder. At 28, Emily wore her hair in a low knot and carried a quiet authority that made men look away first. She had testified in 6 trials, sat through sentencing hearings where Carl's name was read aloud like a curse. He died in county lockup the winter before, heart attack alone. Her mother sent one postcard from a women's facility upstate. "I never knew." Emily filed it under evidence and never opened it again. The new girl arrived on a Tuesday in March, rain drumming the tin roof like impatient fingers. She was 15, maybe 16, with a split lip and eyes that darted like trapped birds. Her name was Lila. She wouldn't speak for 2 days. On the 3rd, she asked for paper. Emily gave her a yellow legal pad and a pen with no cap. Lila wrote in tight, angry loops. They said it was modeling. "They took my phone." Emily read it, folded the page once, and slipped it into the tin with the others. She knew the shape of that story. That night, after lights out, Lila stood in the doorway of Emily's office. "You ever get out?" she whispered. The hallway bulb flickered, throwing shadows across her bruised cheek. Emily closed her laptop. "Every day." Lila's laugh cracked like thin ice. "I mean really out. Like no more nightmares. No more checking locks 3 times. Emily thought of the river, the coins, the way her father's photograph still sat on her nightstand facing the wall, so she wouldn't have to see his smile. "Nightmares fade," she said. "Locks are just metal. You decide what they keep out." Lila studied her for a long moment, then nodded once and disappeared. Spring turned humid. The shelter's garden, Emily's proge. The envelope arrived on a Monday in October, crisp and official, stamped with the seal of the state attorney general. Emily slid it open with a butter knife while the coffee brewed. Inside, a subpoena. People vs. Regina Green, aka Mrs. Green. Trial date, December 3rd. She was listed as witness number 1. The shelter's kitchen filled with the smell of burnt toast. Lila, now 17 and taller than Emily, read over her shoulder. "They finally got her? Looks like it." Emily's voice stayed steady, but her hand trembled enough to rattle the paper. Mrs. Green had vanished after the raid, resurfaced in 3 states under 4 names, always one step ahead of warrants. Until now. Lila's eyes narrowed. "You're going." "I don't have a choice." You always have a choice. Lila's tone carried the weight of someone who'd learned that lesson the hard way. But you're still going. Emily laughed, short and sharp. Yeah, I'm going. The weeks before trial became a blur of preparation. The prosecutor, a woman named Patel with a voice like steel wrapped in silk, met Emily in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and fear. They walked through testimony line by line. The ledger, the rooms, the nights tallied like groceries. Patel slid photographs across the table, Mrs. Green older, thinner, still smiling that sharp smile in a mugshot. She'll try to rattle you, Patel warned. She's good at it. Emily traced the edge of a photo with one finger. She taught me how to survive her. I'll be fine. At night, the shelter girls practiced with her. They role-played cross-examination in the common room, taking turns as the defense attorney. Isn't it true you were a willing participant? One asked, voice cracking with nerves. Emily answered without flinching. I was 13. Willing isn't a word that applies. Lila watched from the doorway, arms crossed. When the mock trial ended, she handed Emily a marigold pressed between wax paper. For the stand, she said. So you remember. The call came at 2:14 a.m. on a Thursday in July. Emily's phone buzzed across the nightstand like an angry wasp. Unknown number. She almost let it ring out, but the shelter's emergency line had taught her never to ignore the dark hours. Marigold House, she answered, voice rough with sleep. A girl's whisper, thin as wire. They said you take runaways. I'm at the Greyhound station. I have $53 and a knife in my sock. Can I come? Emily was already pulling on jeans. Stay in the light. Don't move. I'm 20 minutes away. Lila met her in the kitchen, barefoot, hair in a messy knot. She'd heard the phone from the bunk room. I'm driving, she said. No discussion. They took the shelter van. Headlights cutting through heat lightning that flickered over cornfields. The girl waited beneath the buzzing station fluorescents. 16, maybe 17, sunburned shoulders under a too-big hoodie, eyes scanning every shadow. When the van rolled up, she bolted toward it like a spooked deer. Her name was Sophia. She smelled of bus exhaust and fear. In the back seat she clutched a plastic grocery bag that held one change of clothes, a cracked phone with no service, and a library card with someone else's name scratched out. Emily handed her a bottle of water. You're safe now. Sophia's laugh cracked. Safe's a word they use right before they lock the door. Lila glanced in the rearview. We don't lock doors here. We teach you how to pick them if you ever need to leave. Back at Marigold House, the night staff, 2 former residents now on payroll, met them with blankets and peanut butter sandwiches. Sophia ate standing up, eyes on every exit. When Emily offered the intake room, she shook her head. Can I sleep in the garden? Under the sky? They gave her a cot on the screened porch. She was asleep before the crickets finished their first chorus. Morning revealed the rest. Bruises shaped like fingerprints on her upper arms, a burn on her wrist in the shape of. The fire started at 3:07 a.m. on a Tuesday in late September, the kind of night when the air is so still it feels like the world is holding its breath. Emily woke to the smell of smoke and the shrill scream of the new alarm system Lila had installed over the summer. She was out of bed and running before her mind caught up. The kitchen was already orange. Flames licked up the back wall where the old wiring had finally given out. Amara was in the hall, herding girls in nightgowns toward the front door, counting heads like a roll call. Sophia. Sophia's in the greenhouse. One of the younger ones shouted. Emily's heart stopped. The greenhouse was 50 yards behind the main house, but the wind had shifted. Sparks danced like evil fireflies. She grabbed the fire blanket from the pantry and ran barefoot across the frost-slick grass. The greenhouse door hung open. Sophia was inside, silhouetted against the glow, trying to drag the heavy bags of potting soil to block the flames crawling along the cedar frame. Get out! Emily yelled. Not leaving them. Sophia's voice cracked with smoke and fury. She meant the seedlings, rows of marigolds started for the tiny house village dedication next month. Emily didn't argue. She threw the blanket over Sophia's shoulders, grabbed the hose from the spigot, and turned it full blast. The water hit the flames with a hiss that sounded like a scream. Together they beat back the fire inch by inch until the first fire truck roared up the drive, red lights painting the night bloody. By dawn, the kitchen was a blackened skeleton, the greenhouse half-charred but standing. The girls sat on the front lawn wrapped in blankets, faces streaked with soot and tears. No one was hurt. That was the miracle the news would repeat for days. The insurance adjuster came at noon. Electrical fire, he said, shaking his head. Old house. You're lucky it didn't take everything. Emily looked at the girls planting new marigold seeds in egg cartons on the pick. The storm hit on the first day of spring, 2031. Not a metaphor, an actual Category 3 hurricane that had veered inland and decided to park itself over the county for 12 straight hours. Winds held at 110 miles per hour. The river that had always stayed politely in its banks rose like a living thing and swallowed the back 40 acres of Marigold House in Brown, churning water. Emily was in Seattle training the 47th shelter when the call came. Sophia's voice calm but clipped. We're evacuating. Water's in the tiny houses. Greenhouse is floating. I need you to stay put and keep the network running. I've got this. Emily stared out the hotel window at drizzle that suddenly felt insulting. I'm on the next flight. You'll be grounded. Stay. Trust me. She stayed. For 36 hours she coordinated from a conference room turned war room. Rerouting donations, lining up FEMA contacts, live streaming updates to a network of shelters now spanning 43 states and 2 provinces. Every ping on her phone was a heartbeat. Roof holding. Kids safe. Seed bank moved to second floor. When the waters receded, the damage looked like a war zone. The garden was gone, topsoil scoured away. Marigold rose reduced to broken stems poking from mud. The tiny houses sat crooked on their foundations, porches twisted like broken wings. The greenhouse had vanished entirely, swept downstream in one piece like a glass arc. The girls stood on the front lawn in borrowed boots, staring at the ruin. No one cried. They were past that. Sophia called a meeting in the half-flooded dining hall. We lost the garden, she said. We didn't lose the seed. She opened a metal ammo box salvaged from the attic. Inside, vacuum-sealed packets, every variety they'd ever grown, labeled in Sophia's neat handwriting. The girls cheered like it was New Year's. Rebuilding started before the insurance check cleared. They didn't wait for permission. The national network mobilized. Shelters in Colorado sent SE. The year was 2075. The time capsule opened at dawn on the spring equinox, exactly 50 years after Emily sealed it beneath the morning glories. The ark had become a cathedral of glass and steel, its legs wrapped in purple vines that bloomed from March to November. The Riverwalk Amphitheater seated 5,000. The tiny house village had grown into a self-sustaining eco-hamlet powered by the sun and the stubborn will of girls who refused to stay buried. The ceremony was simple. No politicians this time. Just the residents, past, present, and yet to come. A girl named June, age 16, pried open the capsule with a crowbar painted marigold yellow. Inside, the tin now verdigris with age, and a single seed packet labeled in Emily's faded ink. For the next century. June read the carved lit aloud. Her voice carried over the gardens, amplified by the same solar speakers the girls had soldered in 2031. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. Now we are the sky. The crowd, 3 generations deep, answered in one breath. And the sky keeps growing. Emily was 91. She sat in a wheelchair carved from the door of the original greenhouse, the same one the president had signed the Marigold Act on. Her hair was white as morning glory petals, her hands mapped with soil and time. Sophia, 73 and still terrifying in court, pushed the chair. Lila, Judge Lila, retired but never idle, walked beside them carrying the tin like a relic. They had buried Maria the year before. Her morning glories had outlived her, climbing higher than anyone thought possible. Her great-granddaughter, a botanist, had engineered a strain that bloomed year-round in every climate zone on the continent. They called it Maria's Promise. June opened the tin. The coins spilled out like a river of small suns. Hundreds now, one from every graduate, every shelter, every girl who had ever stepped off a bus with nothing but hope and a photograph. The press flowers had become a. The year was 2125. The bicentennial of the first Marigold house. Earth's skies had changed. 2 thin silver rings, orbital habitats, caught the sunrise like halos. The river that once flooded now powered a fusion grid that lit half the continent. The original 40 acres had become a living archive. The Arca Museum, the tiny houses preserved under glass, the Riverwalk, a pilgrimage path walked by schoolchildren who learned history by touching soil. But the heart still beat in the garden. The bicentennial ceremony began at midnight, when skybloom opened across every continent and every colony. On Earth, Mars, Luna, the asteroid habitats, the flowers glowed in perfect synchrony. A silver pulse that said we are still here. In the original garden stood a girl named Aya, age 17. She was the 10,000th resident of the first marigold house, though the house itself had long since become a city. Her hair was braided with fiber optic threads that shifted color with her heartbeat. In her palm, the last coin from the original tin, now worn to a soft disk of gold. Aya had arrived 6 months earlier on a shuttle from Ganymede, clutching a cracked holophoto of her mother, lost to a mining accident, and a single skybloom seed smuggled past quarantine. She had been sold at 12 to pay her mother's debts. She had escaped at 15 through an airlock and a stolen maintenance pod. She had landed on Earth with nothing but the seed and the words carved into every gate she'd ever seen in colony feeds. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. Now we are the sky. The ceremony was silent. No speeches. Just the glow of skybloom, and the soft hum of a billion lanterns rising from a billion gardens. Aya stepped forward to the hand-shaped bed where Emily's seeds had been planted a century before. The soil was dark, rich, alive with microbes engineered from the compost of 10 generations. She pressed the coin into the earth. Then the seed. Behind her stood the elders. The year was 2500. The calendar had reset twice, but the gardens had not. Proxima Centauri B's night sky was a bruised violet, lit by 2 moons and the faint silver ribbon of Aya's reach. Now a living bridge of skybloom vines that wrapped the planet in a lattice of light. The first interstellar marigold house stood at the equator. A dome of woven carbon and bioluminescent petals. Its roots sunk deep into red soil enriched by 5 centuries of composted hope. Inside, a girl named Lyra, age 14, pressed her face to the observation window. She had arrived 3 days ago on a refugee shuttle from a dying colony in the Orion Arm. Her cloth bag held one thing. A shard of mirror etched with the words they tried to bury us. No coin. No seed. Just the shard and the story her mother had whispered before the colony's air failed. The dome's director, a woman named Kale, met her at the gate. Kale was a direct descendant of June's line. Her skin dappled with photosynthetic freckles engineered for low-light worlds. She carried no tin. Those were relics now, preserved in museums on Earth and Mars. Instead, she carried a single skybloom cutting in a vial of water. "You're late," Kale said, not unkindly. "The midnight bloom started an hour ago." Lyra followed her through corridors of living vines. The air smelled of ozone and wet earth. Girls of every species humanity had become. Tall, short, scaled, feathered, augmented. Tended hydroponic trays or practiced law in zero-G courtrooms projected above the soil beds. A therapy dog with 6 legs and a tail that glowed trotted past, carrying a basket of fresh marigolds. In the central atrium, the skybloom opened in waves. Silver petals unfurled, releasing spores that drifted like stardust. Lyra's breath caught. She had never seen flowers before. Only recycled air and rust. Kale handed her the cutting. "Plant it. Wherever you stand becomes home." Lyra's hands shook. The shard of mirror cut her palm, a thin line of blood that Luke. The year was infinity. Time had folded into itself, a Mobius strip of bloom and root. Calendars were relics, like coins and cloth bags. The universe no longer counted years, it counted openings. At the center of everything stood the garden that was never one place. It had no coordinates. It existed wherever a girl planted a seed and said the words. The garden was not a planet, not a station, not a ship. It was the space between burials and bloomings. Its soil was memory. Its sky was every girl who had ever looked up and refused to look down again. In the garden, Lyra's reflection had become a mirror the size of a galaxy. It did not reflect light. It reflected truth. A girl stepped into the garden. She had no name yet. She carried no bag, no shard, no seed. She carried only the echo of a price whispered across 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 tongues. The mirror showed her nothing at first. Just darkness. The darkness of locked rooms, flooded colonies, poisoned oceans, sold bodies, silenced voices. Then the darkness cracked. From the crack poured every bloom that had ever answered burial. Marigolds, quiet and fierce. Morning glories climbing walls that were never built to hold them. Skybloom opening at midnight across every possible night. Coral song rising in tides that cradled dying stars. Aya's reach. Now a river of light flowing backward through time. Lyra's reflection, showing her herself, not as she was sold, but as she would become. The girl reached out. Her hand passed through the mirror. On the other side, soil. She knelt. She had no seed. So she tore a piece of the darkness from her own chest, the part that still believed the price, and pressed it into the soil. The soil sang. From the darkness grew a new bloom. Not silver. Not coral. Not mirror. It was transparent. A flower made of absence. The shape of every girl who had ever been told she was nothing. The transparent bloom opened. Inside, a single seed. The girl took it. She did not plant it. She swallowed it.